Okay. Thank you everyone for joining us today for our Power Board meeting for September 2023. And so we've got the three of us here, and then just for record, who's online? Who's on? We used to have the screen. To
Andy.
And Andy.
I'm online.
And Mark, is that you too?
Oh, no, it's Craig.
Craig. Okay, and we've got the two of them online. So, okay. So, did everyone get a chance? We'll get started. Did everyone get a copy of the agenda?
Yes.
Yep.
Any questions, comments?
Nope.
Okay, item number 1 then is approve the agenda. Can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second it.
Okay, Dick did the first and Todd second. So, Andy, do you want to start us?
Yes, yeah. Palmer, aye.
Todd?
Spriggs, aye.
Dick?
Saunders, aye.
And Dinsmore, aye. Okay. Item number 2 is the minutes from last month. Any questions or comments on that?
I have no questions or comments.
Questions?
Okay, an approve or a motion?
I'll motion to approve the minutes for last meeting.
I'll second that.
Okay, Todd did the first and Andy the second. Dick, do you want to start us?
Saunders, aye.
Andy?
Palmer, aye.
And Spriggs, aye.
Dinsmore, aye. Okay. Item 3, new business. Turn the time over to Rick.
Okay, we have a couple items this month one for a recommendation to the council and the other just kind of starting a process on the pole attachment. But you've all, in meetings past, we've talked about the steel solar project for UAMPS that is the 1A part is scheduled to come on in, I think it's November, and the 1B part in December of this year, which will give us about 7 megawatts more of solar, which would bring our solar total to just under 8 megawatts. Through the whole process, there was an amendment needed between the agreement between UAMPS and Desiree, who's the developer of the project. And it's one of those things that we were looking for some stuff on the UAMPS side of things, and they were looking for some stuff on their side. So I think it's mutually beneficial to go through the amendment. The main thing on the Desiree side was that they wanted to be able to take advantage with the new IRA bill that was passed towards the end of last year, I believe. There's 2 different kinds of credits that they can get. One's an investment tax credit, which is based on the money they put in, and then there's a production tax credit, and they can pick which way they want to go. Originally, they were planning on, I think, the investment tax credit, which was available prior to that legislation, and so that legislation happened partway through the project, and so they would like to switch it to the production tax credits, which again, the pricing doesn't change to us, but it gives them an economic advantage, or they can get more credits by doing that. Kind of in return, UAMPS has the ability to curtail output for a longer period of time than we did in the original, because there will be potentially hours, particularly early morning after the sun comes up and the loads haven't come up yet, that we may want to basically say we're not going to take output of that. UAMPS as a group, not necessarily Washington. And so we added some flexibility there. UAMPS, they have agreed to carve out a I can't remember how many acres, there's a space of land where UAMPS could install a battery, which is really good, because we could potentially take that solar in the early morning where we may not need it, put it in the battery, discharge it later in the evening where we need it more. So those are the big differences. And then UAMPS is entered into a prepay contract, which allows, and I'm not a tax expert, that they run it through a prepay entity, and that allows them to take some advantage, and we'll get a little lower rate by doing that. So those are kind of the three things UAMPS gets out of it in exchange for the production tax credit for them. Again, the pricing at the 3466 in the briefing document hasn't changed, the 25-year period, so all the main larger points of the contract remain the same. But because it was an amendment to that agreement, it has to go back to all the different governing boards. And so that's why it's brought before you. I had included some talking points in there, unless you really want to. You know, we can go through that. And they were sent out with your packet, so that's kind of it in a nutshell. I've got it scheduled on, assuming you guys make the recommendation to the council, it will go on the council agenda for the 13th. So it's a big, long, wordy thing there in the agenda, but that's how it's.
The only question I had, and this has nothing really, so you just said that we have 8 megawatts that's through solar?
Yeah, we have the one at the Red Mesa, and then when these two phases are both complete.
When they're both
We'll have
complete.
7 there, so
So
basically
eight total?
8 megawatts.
Out of how many, what are we typically using right now?
Well, our July peak was 52 and a half. Shoulder months, the low will get clear down like in the really early morning when before the sun comes up. It'll get down around 10, maybe slightly less than 10 a few times a year. So the peak in August was 42 and a half. So there'll be months that I think, particularly those early morning hours, that we may be long, and that's where looking at potentially getting a battery where we could capture it then and use it later. It comes with a pretty substantial cost, but we want to keep the options open. So that's why they kind of carve that out, as at least have space to be able to do that there. So we'd have a home for it.
There's a new government program for nonprofits, for cities and other nonprofits, right? That for renewable energy, they, instead of a tax credit, you get a direct deposit type thing. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, that's the one that was done after the IRA that allows that. That actually would be applicable to the CFPP, but we won't own this project. So it's a power purchase agreement. That's why the developer would take the credits. But if we were to own the project, yes, those would be available to us.
And it's only for nonprofit organizations, from what I understand, or this is the one that I've been looking into a little bit. You heard anything about that?
I haven't on.
Okay, I'm gonna do some more research.
Because there was, historically, before that federal legislation, like the co-ops and the munis could not have any tax credit benefits.
Right. Yeah, this is something that was just passed not too long ago.
Yeah,
That allow for nonprofits, and was also city municipalities like tribes, things like that.
Yeah,
will get the
yes,
credit.
and I think we're actually talking about the same thing. Like I say,
Okay.
historically, the munis weren't able to get any type of credit, but now with that legislation, we're able to get on the same playing field.
Yeah,
However, how this is structured, since we don't own it,
right.
those credits go to the owner. Now, if UAMPS were to develop a project or we were to want on our own, we could get that credit. Yeah.
Okay.
And that is something that's brand new. And so this started before, and that's one reason why those projects historically have been done through a power purchase agreement, is because we didn't have access to that credit, but the developer could, and essentially could pass along some of those savings. Or they could offer their product at a cheaper rate because of the credit than we could directly if we were to build it. So if this was to come up now, it may be a different approach than a PPA.
Yeah.
So yeah. And this is that same legislation that, like I say, there's the IRA, the Infrastructure something Act,
Yeah.
and then there's another one that's like IIJA or something. There's two of them that were done just 2 or 3 months apart.
Yeah.
Rick, a question on the potential for the battery.
Mm-hmm.
Now, UAMPS is setting aside UAMPS land for, I was thinking future down the road, battery makes all the sense in the world,
Mm-hmm.
but it's going to be a new contract. It's going to cost X amount of dollars. The same owners that own the Steel Solar wouldn't be putting in the batteries.
They would be allowed to bid on the so if UAMPS said, hey, I want to put in a 10 megawatt battery bank there, they would put it out to bid. This would provide space on that site, and an interface to the electrical system is what they've carved out in this agreement.
So in theory, our 25-year guaranteed price could have to be renegotiated if hours were extended.
Well,
They're giving a more premium service.
Well, what I'm contemplating would happen is the power price for this contract would remain the $34.66, but then if UAMPS put in their own battery, those costs would be on top. So this would be the power to stick in the battery, but the battery costs themselves would be on top of that. That would be done as a UAMPS project.
Yeah, it would just give us more flexibility then,
Correct.
longer hours.
Correct. So it allows them to shape the load as opposed to, again, that's the challenge with the renewables, is coming up with a way to shape it. And I've got some graphs that I can.
Well, it was interesting too, because up at the conference, the lady from the city of Burbank was talking about the battery backup systems and the fact that the longevity of the current battery systems in the I guess they're NiCad batteries, is relatively short. And so they're looking at iron batteries that are maybe more expensive initially, but last substantially longer. And so there's a lot of technology changing in the batteries right now too. So it may not be a bad idea that the fact that this is something that they do in the near future as opposed to right now anyhow. It's still up in the air what's
Correct.
premium.
So that's the goal with that. And I apologize, I'm not ignoring you. I'm trying to find something that I think I put some in here.
Do you have an idea, Rick, when this is going to go to city council?
It's on the 13th.
13th.
Yeah, so to Dick's point, I got to share my screen. I apologize. I'm sitting here pointing in with my cursor and I haven't shared my screen. So basically, this is a graph Jake worked on to kind of predict, say, next summer. And the bottom is the minimum load for each hour of the month. The red, so they kind of established a band of the low and the high that we might expect. And then the purple is an average load for those hours. And if you can see these hours here, so if the bars are above those graphs, we have more power than we need. And so if we can capture this potentially with a battery and move it back here, then it will fill in and it fits our shape better. Again, batteries aren't cheap, contrary to what some people out there will tell you. Batteries are very expensive, but it may make some sense to add that flexibility. So that's kind of what we're talking about.
And
And
it's also interesting right there how we look at that graph, and when it comes online, that's when we have that extra for those first 3 hours.
yeah, and so this is doing the same thing, but for April. The scales are different, but again, we've got this time here that if we could shift and move it over here, it would help out a lot. So during the peak time, it's not probably quite as dramatic than even on some of the shoulder months. We can take advantage of that. So, but it happens all the time, and so that's kind of gives you a little insight of. It's always hard to shape our loads when we have to buy blocks, and we've got this nice little curve that actually happens. So.
And then when everybody buys their EV, your curve will change again. It'll all go to 7 o'clock at night.
Yeah, which actually, I think we'll talk about it a little bit at the conference, that I think time of use is not that far in the future, and right now the best time to charge would be from probably about 9 o'clock till noon, 1 o'clock, because that's where we have excess available. So
Which nobody will do, because they'll all be at work.
you're right, but it just exacts. It makes the situation worse. So.
Right.
Or more challenging. So anyway,
Are there any other questions, comments?
No, I think we should recommend.
Is there any other information we need from you, Rick, or is that cover?
I don't think so. Like I say, I did have Rachel send out the full resolution as well as the talking points from UAMP. So like this paragraph here talks about the curtailment abilities again. I mean, there are times that solar can actually be negative, where you have to pay people to take it instead of they buy it from you. And so that's where if the numbers did flip, then we'd be able to curtail for, and it's not a lot of hours, but a few hours each year
The
to help protect that.
the solar contracts, they're still willing to do those longer contracts still, aren't they? This is
Yes.
a 25-year contract compared to
Yeah.
some of those others that are shortening up.
Correct.
So that's a, okay.
So unless there was something specific, okay, it's November 15th on 1A and December 31st for 1B. So basically by the end of the year, we should have both of those on.
No other questions or comments? Motion to recommend to the city council?
I'll make a motion to recommend to the city council resolution authorizing the Steel Solar 1A and Steel Solar 1B project second amended and restated transaction schedules under the master firm power supply agreement with Utah Associated Municipal Power Systems and related matters.
Second?
I'll second it.
So Dick did the first and Todd did the second. Andy, do you want to start us on a vote?
Yes. Palmer, aye.
Todd?
Spriggs, aye.
Dick?
Saunders, aye.
And Dinsmore, aye. Okay, next item under new business, item B.
Okay, so this item is one that we've talked about actually for quite a while, that it was coming. This is a draft agreement of our pole attachment. Excuse me, primarily right now it would be applicable to Lumen, which is the old CenturyLink, and TDS are the two that are on our poles currently. But it would apply to anybody else that may want to come in and attach to our poles. It's a mere 83 pages long, so I'm assuming you've all read that in detail. So my only purpose tonight is to kind of introduce it, and you can use it to help you go to sleep at night for the next month or so. But the purpose of this is to establish the methods and the processes for somebody to attach to our poles. Currently, if an agreement exists somewhere, neither the city nor TDS or CenturyLink Lumen can find a copy of it. So it makes it hard to enforce things. Like we've had issues, we've noticed different projects, it's hard to get them to move onto the new poles, and they eventually do, but we can't say, well, your agreement that you signed says this, because we don't have that. They have been paying an attachment fee. It's not a lot, but based on our study that we will need to just refresh just a little bit because it's about a year dated. The pricing part isn't going to go up much. The main thing here is that we know who's on the poles, when they attach, and a process to make sure the clearances are correct and the strengths are there, so we don't compromise the reliability of the system. So right now it's watermarked as a draft. I still need to do my final review. I've got it into Jeremy and to Thad to do the city's internal review, and then any comments that the Power Board may have is welcome. A lot of it's kind of legalese stuff that I'm relying on Thad to have that fun. And he'll do a great job. We patterned it after APPA, American Public Power Association, has a draft kind of a boilerplate document, and that's where the origins of this come from. It had conduit systems and stuff like that in theirs, so I went through and took all the conduit references out and a few paragraphs here and there, and that's one of the things I've got to do is where it references in this paragraph, another one, I got to make sure they're referencing the correct numbers and those kind of things. So I'd say it's in 80-90% complete status. Certainly good enough that you can see where we're at and welcome any comments. We'll need to finalize and review the application fees that are outlined there, and then, like I said, we need UFS, the same one that did our rate and impact study. They did an analysis on what the attachment per pole should be per year, but it is a bit dated, and I want to just make sure that we're as current as we can be when we do this. So, and so you'll see those in the document, I think, are all just question marks right now. But it outlines, like on page 29, the permitting process of if somebody comes in, what they need to submit, and it puts some clocks on us as well that we need to respond for them within a timely manner. It identifies the calculations that they need to, engineering work that they need to do, so they just can't come in and attach and go like historically has happened. It will set a removal or a transfer timeline that they have to move when, like we've been upgrading recently, the 200 East line. You know, they'd have basically 60 days from when we're done with that to be moved to the new poles. Like I said, it also does put some clocks on us that they call it make ready. Say they do an analysis and they're going to attach to 10 poles and 2 poles need to be changed out, either taller or stronger, whatever it might be, then we'd have 120 days to get that work done. And so it helps them in their planning as well. Way back in April of 2019, I know Mike was on it at the time. I don't know if the rest of you were. We have a small cell attachment, which is basically the 5G equipment. We haven't really had anybody approach us for that, but back in 2019, that was a hot topic. We do have a standard and requirements we do for that, and so that kind of, or that got blended in and are incorporated into this document. Instead of having 2, we'll have one that addresses, they call it wireline, which is just the attachments, and then the other is the small cell. So again, I didn't really have anything specific to cover other than that, just give you a general flavor of why we need to do that. And in the ideal world, you know, we'd hopefully be ready maybe next month to approve it at the power board level. Whether it's October or November, in that time frame, we've been 30 years without it, so I don't know that another month's gonna kill us. I'd rather get it right and take some time if there's concerns. So I just want to move it forward at a reasonable pace, and hopefully I can get through the parts that I need to review in that time frame as well. So, and you don't have to wait till the meeting. If you see something or have questions, just email me, and we can work on those as we go. So that's, again, the basic purpose. We don't have any action tonight, just to introduce it.
Rick, as the city grows and new areas come on, some of those entities would put newer technology in that area, right? Is there any way of making them upgrade the rest of the system through this agreement? Does that make sense? Where say they can go wireless in this new part of town because that's just what the technology, yet the rest of the town's still wired.
I would guess that's something we could look into. This doesn't do that. I could say that we have had meetings with some of the providers, and they do have plans to start basically working towards getting fiber to home. So, but as it currently stands, there isn't a requirement by 5 years you have to have fiber to all the homes or something like that. So I don't know what the appetite of the city management or the council would be. I feel your pain. I'm on the old copper system where I live, and
I'm just thinking,
it's pretty darn slow.
That's just something that I could see it happening 10 years down the road, that just there's always changes. So
Yeah, fiber might be outdated by then. But it's nice now.
okay. So yeah, so if everyone will look through that and questions, just refer those to Rick, and comments. And then again, what was the date you wanted to?
By our next meeting, again,
Wrap
whether
that
we had an action item at next meeting or maybe a little more discussion with any of thoughts of, like I say, I know it's not the most exciting reading, and like I say, it's a legal document, so it's not very entertaining at all. Between engineering and the legal side of it, it's probably not your most compelling read, but that's what it is.
Yeah. I was kind of hoping that it was an old document that you were updating and you were going to highlight the changes. Unfortunately, you're
No, there's
saying
80
this is all new.
There's 82 pages of changes. Well, I guess with the exception, we do have the small cell that's incorporated in, so there's probably 10 pages that are the same.
No shortcut.
All righty. Okay, on to the next item, number 4, regular business.
Okay, I should be able to be relatively brief on most of it. The one good news, now whether or not we were talking before the meeting, if our customers realize it or not, the PCA actually went down about a quarter cent last month. And that's the first time in about 18 months that's happened. So I'm hoping that's a glimmer of some positive things to come on that front. So anyway, so I was just excited not to have to say it was higher. So, but we are well aware of the concerns of our customers, and we are working towards, finding resources that will help keep those costs down, and the solar projects are part of that puzzle. But it's not a simple one thing fits all thing. So we are working on that, very well, like I say, aware of those issues. So our July peak, like I said previously, was about 52.5 megawatts, which was barely over our all-time peak. So this year set our new all-time peak. August was about 45.25 megawatts on its peak. So, and that's about the same as what the August has been in the previous 3 years. It's been roughly in that range.
Seems like this August has been more mild, but maybe with the growth and everything else, it's evened out a little bit. Has it not been?
Because like our last billing period's actually from July 20th to August 20th. So that was probably our hottest period of the summer. I know the latter part of July was really warm.
Yeah.
But you're right, the latter part of August tapered off. So when you see that bill, you got to look at the read dates, that it's not an exact calendar. Crews have been out working on lots of smaller projects. On 200 East, they're pretty well done with that, other than the transfers. This is down off of 100 East, not 100 East, by the industrial area. You can see the old pole and the new pole, and it's hard to see. I wasn't able to. Like this pole down here, it has quite the old bow in it compared to the new straight one. You don't realize how bent they are until you put the new one right next to it. So they reworked that little tap line. So they've been doing lots of different projects of similar nature. Right now they're working on 200 East, extending some conduits across the road for a future project that's there where the old appliance place was. So that's why you'll see them there. The generators for July and August ran roughly 6 hours a day. At the hotter days, they'd go up to 8, maybe 10 hours, depending on the needs. And then September, we're dropped back to about 4 hours a day Again, it's always a challenge when, like over the weekend with the storms, there really wasn't much load, and then this week we're gonna be up around 100, so we'll have a big swing. We'll probably go from over the weekend in the low 20s megawatts to probably in the upper 30s, low 40s this coming week. So again, it's hard to buy a product for the entire month and have it fit that big fluctuation. The Grapevine substation site and trailhead, we've received the bids for those, and they're in the process of evaluating the award of that. And our portion of it is we'd end up with a substation site with the block fence around it, and basically the conduits extended from that site out to the outside world, if you will, to interface with the system. And so while they were doing the trailhead, it's kind of a combined project with the Parks Department. So, and it's really a neat trailhead they got planned there. If you like hiking in that area, I mean, we'll have bathrooms and parking and equestrian parking, and it'll be quite a nice improvement up there. So that'll probably go to council. I'm guessing there's a few things Jeremy's got to work on in the next 2 to 4 weeks, something like that. So we did get our responses back to our AMI, Advanced Meter Infrastructure. On August 11th, we had 5 responders, and if you want to look at those proposals, some of them were over 700 pages long. So Mike put a spreadsheet together and sent back to him to kind of filter some of that information in a more concise form. So, and those forms are due back the end of this week. It's going to take some time to evaluate all those, and it's a big commitment. Once you make that decision, you're pretty much with that manufacturer, I would say, for 15, 20, 30 years kind of scenario. So again, we want to move it ahead, but we want to get it right and not make a bad decision that 5 years from now we regret. So I know Dick's reached out and said he'd be interested. I'd like to narrow it down to probably 3, and then we'll have them come in and do physical presentations on their systems and what they can and can't do for us. And
They're going to have to summarize better than 700 pages worth of report.
I started looking through, and again, a lot of it, they put everything in the kitchen sink in there, all their legal stuff, and which I guess is important, but not the first thing I'm going to look at is the legal side of things when we do that. So that's coming. On solar applications, we had 7 in August, which is pretty close to what we've been averaging now, is anywhere probably from 5 to 10, somewhere in that range a month. So let's see, what else does Wayne have? We helped the Parks Department on their ball field lights. They have a thermal imaging gun and went around and checked our substations at night to see if there's any hot spots to try to catch a bad connector before it burns up or becomes an outage or a problem. And fortunately, they didn't find any big issues there. On the outage side of things, we had just really 3 smaller ones. Just 2 of them were secondary, and 1 of them had a fuse that went out during the hot period. So, and we made it through the storm.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a bit nervous. Emailed Wayne, who was on call, and said, "Any problems?" He said, no, and he said he even considered, I think it was Thursday night, not even going to bed. You know, and
Yeah, we sat out on the patio.
it was
and
crazy.
I've never in my life seen that many thunderbolts. And Lori and I were talking, saying, wow, I bet you Rick's not sleeping.
Yeah, no, we were doing the same thing until the water came up underneath our, you know, it was blowing so hard, we were getting wet on the deck, so. But fortunately, we had a tree branch, I think it was Friday morning that some people called that was in a secondary, so it didn't cause an outage or anything, but that's, I guess, a testament to the crews. I think our tree trimming program that we've been pretty diligent about the last 5 to 7 years, you know, pays off. That's where it shows, and the rebuild of some of the old rickety lines. Not that we still don't have some out there that we need to work on, but it all works towards hardening the system. So that's all as far as the general. I guess my only other note is based on those graphs I was showing you with the loads, we have made a request for UAMPS to get us pricing for natural gas next year for the generators and some small power products as well for the summer next year. We're waiting on a response back there, so we'll see. Hopefully the market's favorable to us and we can move forward. Ready to shift to UAMPS?
Yeah.
And I guess on that, the three of you that are here in the room were able to attend. You know, what were your thoughts? And you should have got a Survey Monkey from UAMPS. Hopefully you responded to that. It helps them on those conferences. So anything you want to let Andy, and I guess Craig that was on, he was there as well. So.
Well, I thought it was extremely interesting. I thought it was better than last year's.
I think the topics,
Because the
personally,
topics were more engaging, the in-depth discussion on the EVs and the demands of EVs, the demand, not only the challenges for producing the power, but having the infrastructure to handle the distribution that the EV demand is going to create. I was very impressed with that City of Burbank manager talking about the solutions they're looking at and how they're making major capital expenditures that only cover a very minute part of their demand for the city. And then she talked about the battery application, and even the marketing gentleman that talked about his worldwide survey that he did on the perception of the new nuclear, the safe nuclear, which is what we're pushing with the carbon-free project. And I just thought, in general, that it was very, very good.
Good.
I agree. I think the speakers were really well, explained things really well to where you could understand, and the topics were very interesting. The challenges now with decarbonization, as well as lack of availability of power, is just interesting in general. Tough time to do decarbonization when you're struggling to get the power that you need. But to have them say that prices are going to triple in the next 20 years, I think they said, with the program they have in California. There's some I could just imagine how difficult that's going to be to get past the general public.
Well, and it
Yeah,
was,
I was just going to say, I think sometimes, and I've talked to different people, I don't think you can afford what you're asking for, you know, on those lines. In order to do it, it just becomes very, very costly, especially once you get at that higher level. You know, the first 10, 15, 20% is pretty easy. The more you get up towards the top,
But
it
to
gets
triple,
really difficult.
yeah.
and it was really interesting listening to the guys from Texas, where the utility is for profit, and they have no problem in being able to fire up gas generators. And they're just rubbing their hands about the demand. Saying, oh boy, we can charge for this and charge for that. And well, we're not, I mean, it gave us a good perspective of something that's completely different than our model. Unfortunately, we can't do that model. And in the West, other than Texas, I don't think you're going to be able to burn natural gas. So it was interesting hearing them too. It was a good group of speakers.
Good.
Yeah, I think the time of use and the AMI, I think that's probably where things are headed now more than ever with the problems, the challenges that we have. So it'll be interesting to see how that progresses.
I agree.
And I think it's appropriate that we're visiting that now.
Yeah, it's going to take, I'm guessing, a couple of years
Yeah.
to make that transition. So
I thought there was a lot of information that needs to get public. And it was good to see that UAMPS is out there trying to look at the next steps and how we can find more power, how we can resolve some of the issues that we're going to see in the future and address issues and make it easier on the customer for the betterment of both, for both the power, the system and the customers.
The public perception of nuclear, I thought, was very interesting. I had no idea. I thought it would be opposite of that. There would be more people against nuclear or concerned with nuclear than for it. And I think they said 1 in 4 is opposed to it, something like that.
Or it was like 15%. It was that 15% that no matter what, they're always going to be against whatever it is.
Whatever it is, yeah.
The telling thing of that entire presentation to me was the demonstrations in front of the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant when it was constructed. And that was us when we were 17 and 18, all demonstrating, no nukes, no nukes. Now, this year, same group of people, young people saying save it, because they realize that this is the only way. If you want reduced emissions, this is about your only path you're going to go. It was really telling.
I think it's quite funny that Dick says our age when he's talking about,
Well, I can relate a little
He
bit.
meant you
More
and
so than
him and Craig, I think.
I'm in between there where you guys were fighting at the new generations for it, and I'm like, I don't know, whatever.
You have any comments, Councilman Coates?
Yeah, I would just like to say that was a good conference, and I agree that the nuke thing really, the nuclear was just definitely different than I anticipated. I thought there'd be more people against it, but I think people are realizing. So I did forget that till Dick brought that up, but it definitely was a telling sign of the times of how we have to go to more nuclear to make our power needs.
And I was just looking through my notes that you guys really hit it on the head. The only other thing I noted or in the UAMPS integrated resource plan was extending the life of the resources we have. I think the main one that we're involved with at this point is NEBO, the natural gas plant there in Payson. It originally, I think, was planned in the 2030, its normal 30-year life. But I think with the work that's been done, it can go well beyond that. But extending those assets that you currently have in any way you can. And then comes back to, not all kilowatt hours are the same. There is a difference between intermittent and base load, and you need to have a mix of each. And I think we're getting a fairly good balance of that. Again, it's an ongoing kind of moving target, it feels like, but
it seems like patterns are changing, and that's the challenge too. That's really, I mean, it used to be, I mean, we always talked that duck bill, and it doesn't seem like that duck bill always applies now.
Yeah, and it's hard to, what's that new shape gonna look like, and what do you need to build to do that, so. Well, good, and I do very much appreciate everyone that went. It's helpful for me to have you get exposed to that directly instead of just, well, he always says this. So, and it's great to, you know, socialize and get to know each other on a different level as well, so appreciate it. Anything else on the conference, anybody? So Andy needs to go next year.
Yeah, I'm signing up in advance for next year because it sounded very informative. Wish I could have been there.
Yeah, and I know it, unfortunately, for those with kids, just the timing of it, before our school starts here, it's usually that first week of school, almost without exception. So we understand, and you got to do your best. So one other thing that I was able to participate in, I guess it was a week ago Friday, is went out and attended the Red Mesa Solar ribbon cutting, and they gave all the participants a plaque. This is some form, I can't remember, they told us what kind of Indian art this is, but they had a local guy do this, and I won't attempt to say the Navajo words that are there, but working together we can do great things is what that means.
Okay.
So, like I say, I won't even attempt to pronounce it. It was very interesting, and it's interesting, particularly in that project that you know, has some real benefit to the tribe, and it was interesting to get exposed a little more directly to their culture and how they do things. It was about a 3 to 4 hour presentation from start to end, and it was good. So, and that project's been doing great. It's comes up, and you know, pretty much like the curve shows, and it just sits there all day long and then drops off in the sun. And so that one we can predict when it will be there. You know, every once in a while you'll see the clouds or something must be going on over there, because it'll drop 20% and then it'll come back up, kind of thing. So let's see, I've already talked about that one. On our Central St. George project, probably the biggest thing there is, and it probably doesn't make a lot of sense, is we're working on the BES is the bulk electric system, and we're working on an application to submit to WEC, the Western Electric Coordinating Council, to get an exemption from, if all the utilities in the county were to run their system closed loop, it could potentially put us into a lot of reliability requirements that you have to document, and there's just a fair amount of baggage that comes with that. Since all the power in the county comes down basically from Central in a single corridor, Dixie's working on their side and UAMP's on another side. Feel like there's a good chance that we can get that exemption, which would accelerate being able to loop that. And what that does for us, any single line outage on that level of the system, the 138 system, wouldn't cause an outage. It would just trip both ends. Nobody would even know that it happened for the most part, except the utilities. And it would delay or reduce the amount of money that has to be spent on improvements coming out of the St. George sub. If we don't do that, we're going to have to be building more lines, which is a challenge because of the habitat. Building through cities, that's not an easy process, nor is it cheap. So it's, and if they came back and said that we project's been running great. It ran basically 24/7 all of July and didn't never shut off. And August, I believe, was the same way as well. There could have been a day or two in there they shut down, but they'll ramp down a little bit at night, and then again trying to mimic the load pattern as best we can. Vale's running well. It's down a little bit the last couple of weeks because of as the electrical load's down, the gas usage goes down because they're not compressing gas for the merchant plants. But it's been running well. Talked about Red Mesa, Steel Solar. We're starting, well, we've had a study project for geothermal. And there was one that looks promising, and so we're going to move forward with that and see if we can get more details, get a term sheet that would identify more specific of the timing, the pricing, and those kind of things. So, and those are located in Nevada. So there's some transmission issues we got to work through. But there's some that look promising there. So again, looking into options, particularly those that are carbon free, and it would have more of a base load profile being a geothermal. So I guess more to come on that one. The wind projects, they're Horse Butte and Pleasant Valley, they're both had reasonably good months, around 25 to 30% capacity factor. I noticed today they were down to basically zero today. So it just really depends on, what the storms are doing in Wyoming and Idaho at that time. I guess the one note on the Horse Butte project, we are looking at potential. They've studied that there's 58 megawatts installed now, but the infrastructure was designed for 100 megawatts. We found out that with some software changes, we can get more output out of the existing turbines. And then they're also looking at the costs to install some more turbines up there on that same project. And we'd probably stay at the same percentage, which isn't large. It'd give us probably about another megawatt of wind if those two components went through. So we'll keep you posted on that. So again, looking at lots of different options. One of the items that I had, or a couple of them I had, again, hopefully these notes from the UAMPS meetings are helpful. You can see in a little more detail from, oh, that's not the one I was looking for, sorry. Here was the ribbon cutting, and this, he's a young man. He's, I think, 35 years old, and he's the president of the Navajo Nation. So I thought, he's really young. And I asked one of the tribe members, and he said, yeah, I think he's 35. So, but it was, like I say, it was a good experience. And off to this side of the pictures where the solar farm is. So. On the CFPP is probably the one UAMPS item left is, again, we sent these talking points out. We're still on schedule to the January timeframe to be able to submit the COLA to the NRC. So from the technical side, I think things are moving along quite well and on target and on budget. I know I sound like a broken record. There's two challenges. Is the price, and we have the $89 target. And they're evaluating the investment tax credit or the production credits that you referenced. Some of that language or some of the information they're getting may not be as favorable as we had originally thought, so they're looking through that. And so hopefully we can still meet that target. And then on the other side, with the 80% subscription, there's a lot of work to do there. There's a lot of interested parties. However, most of them want additional mechanisms to de-risk it. So those are the challenges. And I was trying to see where. But again, those are the same two items, that the same concerns all the UAMPS members have, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to continue to move forward. So, but there's a lot of work. There's the ECT is slated for October, the economic competitive test, so that will kind of tell us about how we're doing on the 89, and then the subscription goal of 80 was set basically at the end of the year, mid-January, something like that, if I remember correctly. So we're not too far away. We're 3 to 4 months away on all
And we
those.
haven't had any additional,
Not anybody that's able to or willing to sign at this point. And again, they're wanting additional protections, which would be great to have.
yeah.
So hopefully we can find ways to do that. So like I say, to me, there's two different kind of sides. The technical side moving forward, it's progressing really well. I think the 89 is possible, but it's going to be challenging to get there. And then as well as the subscription, again, they've talked to tribes and investor-owned utilities. We have lots of cheerleaders, but not a lot of people that want to jump in the game at this point. So I guess without a guaranteed win. So
Not much we can do other than wait.
we do our best, and UAMP staff is working very diligently, and NewScale and the whole overall team is working to make it a success. So. And I think that's probably about all I have, unless you've got more questions.
Is there any questions or?
Nope.
I don't have any questions.
Okay. Next meeting is November,
October.
October, sorry, skipping a month.
However, you do bring up an interesting, normally we have to cancel on November because it's election day, but because they moved election day in Utah to the special election, which is right before Thanksgiving,
We don't have to change our schedule.
I guess there's no reason why we couldn't. Yeah. Because originally, obviously, we didn't know we were going to have that change when we set the schedule in January, so. And with some of these things going on, it may not, I'd probably plan on one in November unless you guys have a problem. I would think, I'm hopeful we'll have some feedback on the CFPP, the pole attachment, probably could easily spill into that time frame as well, so.
I look at my calendar, it was in there, so.
Well, good.
So, okay, our next meeting is October 3rd. And if there's no other questions, anyone got a motion to adjourn?
I'll go ahead and motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
So Todd first, Dick second. Andy, do you want to start
Yes.
it?
Palmer, aye.
Dick?
Saunders, aye.
Spriggs, aye.
Dinsmore, aye. Okay, thank you, everybody, and
Thank you.
thank you, guys.
Thanks,
See-
everyone. Thanks, Rick.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.